Thank you. It's my pleasure to have been selected to introduce our first keynote speaker this afternoon. I first met Attorney General Jim Hood in March 2011 at a meeting of the National Association of Attorney Generals when he was chairing the Committee on Intellectual Property Rights. He has always been an advocate of enforcement of IP rights because he knows the deadly impact of unsafe products that could have on the citizens that he serves. Attorney General Hood has had a long career of service protecting the public. He clerked initially with the Mississippi Supreme Court, was an assistant attorney general for 5 years, and was a district attorney for the 3rd Judicial District for 8 years. He was educated in the public schools of Chickasaw County, and he is a 5th-generation Mississippian. He's an avid outdoorsman and hunter, which makes him uniquely qualified to chase criminals when they enter into the state of Mississippi. As a prosecutor, Attorney General Hood has tried more than 100 jury cases while serving as a district attorney. He successfully prosecuted several historic cases, including the prosecution and conviction of Edgar Ray Killen for the 1964 murders of 3 civil rights workers. Now serving in his 2nd term as Attorney General, Jim Hood has never stopped implementing new programs to protect the public. He established a vulnerable adults unit, a domestic violence unit, an identity theft unit, and a crime prevention and victim services division to better protect Mississippians. He has launched initiatives to prevent workplace and school violence, stalking, and domestic assault cases. Attorney General Hood has developed and distributed numerous publications to assist and to educate both consumers and the public service entities in areas such as cyber crimes, consumer protection, domestic violence, victims assistance, election, and government law. In recognition of his leadership, he was selected as president of the National Association of Attorney Generals in June of 2014 and quickly announced his priorities of fighting digital crime and protecting IP property rights with a national emphasis with the other attorney generals. Jim and his office were awarded an Exemplary Partnership Award in 2011 from the Homeland Security Investigations involving an investigation of businesses in the state which were engaged in the unlawful sale of counterfeit and prohibited pharmaceuticals which had been imported from Mexico. By following up aggressively on all claims involving counterfeits, Attorney General Hood has done something new, and he showed us that the fight to protect consumers against counterfeit drugs is not just a federal responsibility, but the states have a valuable role to play in these cases. Were the other 49 state attorney generals equally engaged in the fight against counterfeits, I believe the landscape would look significantly different today. Ladies and gentlemen, I present the Honorable Attorney General Jim Hood.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Tom, for your kind introduction. I can tell what my staff sent you to say good things about me was old. I'm actually in my 3rd year of my 3rd term. I apparently need to update that, but at any rate, I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. I appreciate this type of organization that puts together people and groups that may not think alike, but at least you're able to talk about different issues. And I'm here to provide you my own perspective as Attorney General of the state of Mississippi, as opposed to speaking on behalf of the president of the National Association of Attorneys General, commonly called NAG, is what our organization is. And I know you're thinking, what is this guy from Mississippi who looks like Conway Twitty going to tell us here today about intellectual property? I've been a DA. I was a DA for 8 years. I love that job. Tried a lot of cases. And what a prosecutor does is you break down information that experts testify to and put it in terms that all people can understand, experts and others as well. So I'm not here to tell you a lot of information about what some of the experts who have actually been here today and told you, because they know a lot more about it than I do. But I am kind of here to tell you about the perspective from attorneys general of what we see at a high altitude level when we have people in different divisions within our office, cybercrime and consumer. I have a couple of our consumer investigators here today. They have done a lot of great work in the area of intellectual property theft. You know, IP theft and dealing with the internet makes my job interesting. You know, it started years ago when 2004, when I became Attorney General, with what are we going to do about child pornography going through the internet? And we had a standoff with the three primary internet service providers, Verizon, AT&T, and Comcast at that time, trying to get them to try to filter out some of the child porn images that we knew were actually child porn images. And which seemed easy, but, you know, it wasn't that easy. It took, you know, federal agencies getting involved to help us in that push. But we finally reached a point where we were able to convince them that, you know, it wasn't blocking things on the internet. You know, we were just filtering out items that we knew were illegal, clearly illegal, unquestionably illegal, and that there were hash values placed upon those photographs. And it was done through the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC. And they are a nonprofit organization. They were putting hashtags or hash values. Let me state, I get those confused some of the time, and I get a lot of flack for it. But hash values identify those photographs and movies and whatever it is that goes through the internet with child porn, and applies it to a specific picture of a child that we know is a child victim. So we got the internet service providers to begin to use that technology. We've tracked down so many of the people who share child pornography on the internet. We've arrested them in Mississippi. It's a 5-year, 40-year, 5-year minimum, 40-year maximum sentence that people get for possession of child pornography. We've driven the numbers down from the top guy in 2009 with using technology to track them down. And in 2009, January, I believe it was, the top downloader in our state was downloading 350 images per month. And now it's less than 50 because of a lot of arrests. We've deterred it. Some have, you know, encrypted. Some have gone to other sites, but we're still allowing technology to track them. So as Attorneys General, we have a track record of confronting issues out there. And on the internet, I got involved dealing with intellectual property theft from that point, and I was intellectual property theft co-chairman for a period of about 5 years until just last year. And, you know, we do a lot of work. It's not just intellectual property of dangers on the internet. I mean, it's human trafficking. It's dealing with spice and bath salts and illegal drugs and legal prescription drugs as well that are sold over the internet. It's music, movies, software. There's so much, there's such a broad spectrum that there's not just one federal agency that polices the internet. And it's kind of fallen to attorneys general to try to stand in the fold. As a DA, I know what DAs do well. But DAs don't have cybercrime units. In Mississippi, we've been lucky. We've had an excellent one. We've been well funded because of our congressional leadership, and we've been in the fore of cybercrime investigations. So AGs, you know, go across a broad spectrum more so than federal agencies, but we have partners like FDA and FBI and Postal and different agencies in their respective areas where we cross lines and we work very well with them. And AGs have that challenge out there that's brought to us, you know, through issues that are brought to us by the internet. We got an intellectual property theft grant in our office, set up a unit in our Consumer Protection Division to handle, you know, counterfeit drugs and primarily those things that hurt Mississippi consumers, not just drugs, but, you know, contact lens, you know, that are counterfeited. I know we have one case in Tupelo, Mississippi, where some kids get these smiley faces on their contact lens, and some legitimate companies make those. But some girl bought one at some, you know, Quick Mart, put it on her eye, and it peeled, I guess it was a lens, you know, off when she took it off. There are just so many of those things that hurt our consumers, and that's so AG's engaged, particularly when it's causing harm to our consumers. So, you know, we did a lot of cases. We worked well with the federal government. One day, I think we served 27 federal warrants on bodegas. That's a Hispanic grocery store. And FDA was involved, ICE was involved, U.S. attorneys in our state were involved. Our Consumer Protection Division initially received the information and started the CIs that made those arrests. We found about 200 illegal drugs in those raids. A lot of the people were Hispanic, and they wouldn't go to a doctor, so they had to get their medications by some means. You know, we seized everything from oxycodone to liquid birth control medications, which apparently is prevalent in, you know, South American countries. So by doing that, though, we've deterred that flow of information. Of course, we arrested the main guy who was supplying all the drugs into Mississippi. But after we did checks after that, and we found that those places weren't selling those type drugs. So the deterrent effect worked in that case of where we worked well together. One federal agency that we worked well with for years when I was assistant AG, particularly, it was Customs. And they kept telling our investigators in Consumer Protection, two of them are here, they kept telling us in the deep, dark Mississippi Delta, you've heard that before, where the southern planters live, that there was some warehouse that was distributing Viagra. And, that's been going on for 5 years, hasn't it? We've been hearing this information. They're just definite that it's happening, but I can't get a witness. I'm like James Brown, nobody's going to come up and say, hey, I bought it and it didn't work for me. No self-respecting guy is going to do that. So if y'all got any information on it, you can provide me with that afterwards, I think. But, and working with the internet and realizing like the internet service providers were the choke point. Then I realized that the search engines were the choke point for the sale of pharmaceuticals, illegal and legal drugs. And, there are a lot of those illegal pharmacies, online so-called pharmacies, not pharmacies, they're drug dealers, what I call them as a prosecutor. And those that are supplying counterfeit items or legitimate drugs, there's so many out there that I figured out, look, we can't go out there and do all those. We're going to leave that to federal agencies to do that. But we AGs, in cooperation with federal agencies, can confront search engines, primarily Google. I mean, they're 65% of the market, I think as much as 70% mobile on certain times of day of the search engines. So we have confronted Google. It's been going on about 3 years. And we started with them, but then we noticed somebody's getting money for this, for counterfeit items. And so as Intellectual Property Theft Committee chair, we had this meeting, and I was like, who called this meeting? When we all get there, it was the banks. It was the rights holders, many of them, some of whom are here today. We're at this meeting about 4 years ago, and we got the banks there, and we said, you're paying a lot of these illegal online companies, the credit card companies are, you're the money changers. You are allowing this flow of money. What if we had a list from some independent outfit that identified a lot of these companies? What would you do? Would you stop payment to them? And they go, yes. And we're like, what? You're actually going to do that? There's a lot of money involved here. And the banks stepped forward. They did their part. Now, that agreement was reached with, at a different place, the White House or somewhere. But that's how that agreement came about. And the banks began to stop that processing of money for child pornography as well as illegal items. So we start at the table, Google's there, and many of the questions were in the closing comments there, all right, search engines, that includes Microsoft too, but they're like 12% of the market. And like, what are you going to do? What good corporate citizenship are you going to serve just like the banks have done? They're willing to accept these lists that say what these websites are, and they don't have any liability, but they don't have any duty to do business with these companies. There are online outfits, whatever they are. Some of them are just drug dealers. But the banks agreed to do it without protections. Well, Google has protections under Section 230 of the Communication Privacy Act. That provides immunity. And it was a good idea when it was originally passed because we wanted people to be able to post on the internet, freedom of information, freedom of ideas, and whomever's board that they posted that information on, that provider was not responsible. That's what Section 230 was designed to do. Unfortunately, Google has tried to use Section 230 as a sword rather than a shield. They've tried to use that to protect themselves. And let me give you a good example. If the Washington Post had an ad in the paper today, buy prescription drugs without a prescription, all the federal agencies would be raiding the place, and we would shut the place down. But if they put the same ad on their internet site, they have some protections under Section 230 of the Communication Privacy Act. So that act is what has been used as a shield to prevent search engines from doing something to try to help the situation out with the sale of, and it's not just prescription drugs, it's illegal, it's bath salts, where people are going nuts and killing people. It's spice, it's Viagra, it's, I don't know what they're doing, but anyway, it's a lot of other sales that we AGs are trying to deal with. And as I said, human trafficking. If the Washington Post ran an ad, hey, here's a site where you can go meet 15-year-old girls, you know, we would stop that. But if they did it online, it's different. There are different rules. We don't necessarily need to change the rules. We just need corporate citizens to step up. And so I've been pushing Google for several years now to develop some lists. Do like the banks did. The banks don't have that immunity protection. But take these lists from, say, the motion picture industry. Take the list of the top 10, or at least those that are in the movie theaters right now, and don't allow them to stream on TV. I did a presentation in Boston to the National Association of Attorneys General, and of course I invited the CEO of Google to attend and his chief counsel, and they of course declined to come. But I showed where we had made purchases online of prescription drugs and illegal drugs, our investigators had. And that's after they paid $500 million penalty. They wrote a check for $500 million to the state of Rhode Island and the Department of Justice because they were caught selling prescription drugs online, and their advertisers were the ones that were leading you to it. Did you know that? That happened in 2011. They wrote a check for $500 million, Google did, because it was going all the way up to CEO, and the information that when the feds got into the emails, that 7-page non-prosecution agreement is just, you wouldn't believe a company would do what they did. Their advertisers were telling Canadian pharmacies how to avoid their systems that would detect the sale through Canadian pharmacies online. And so after they did that, I sent my investigators online undercover. They made buys of oxycodone. You know, we got them tested at the crime lab. Some were legit, some were bogus. Some ripped us off. Didn't send anything, but tried to take the money. And so, you know, it was Viagra. It was about any drug you name it. We bought it online, and it was from their advertisers. Exactly what they promised the federal government that they would not do in that 7-page non-prosecution agreement. It was during the 2-year probationary period that they were still under at the time. That was in 2012, June of 2012, and it went out June of 2012, I think. So, you know, it shows that they had knowledge. And we didn't just go do a search for, you know, oxycodone. We just type in prescription, and it would auto-complete out to buy prescription drugs without a prescription. You might have been a little old lady who's decided, I don't want to walk down to the pharmacy anymore. I'm going to go online and type in prescription. The autocomplete would drop down and suggest to you to buy it without a prescription. And what is that doing with kids? That's who's using that internet. It's not, you know, it's not little old ladies, but they were leading you to those illegal websites. So I sent a letter to them saying, look, this is ridiculous. You can't lead people to illegal sites, encourage illegal activity. Well, they shut that down. And so now you can probably type in, if some of you got laptops, well, you can probably type in some things like how to murder someone. You're going to see a YouTube video, or how to rape someone and get away with it. How to buy prescription drugs without a prescription in a YouTube video. We found those online. You know, they shut them down. It's like whack-a-mole, though. They say, you come tell us what you find out there. They want government to carry the water for them. They want us in law enforcement to go out here and patrol everything they put up on the internet and then tell them what's wrong. Well, it doesn't work that way. You know, they have a responsibility. They think that Section 230 is going to protect them, but they may be right. They may beat me in court, but, you know, I'm about to issue a civil investigative demand to get in those emails and start finding out what they actually have done in a lot of areas, not just prescription drugs, and then the battle's going to be on. And those of you who represent rights holders here today, you need to pick a side. Those of you who represent the federal government need to encourage your agencies to step up and get involved in this battle as well, because I think what we will find if we ever get to those documents, because when the federal government was going toward the documents of the emails of their CEO at the time, that's when the tent folded. Once they got the initial group of documents and emails and so forth, they were able to settle the case. But this one, I don't know where it's going to end, but it's a battle that's got to be fought, because when you have a corporation as large as this that has more money than the federal government, you know, they're going to hire lawyers and have battles. And I've been in these battles before. After Katrina, I sued State Farm and every insurance company involved. Most of your clients, if you represent a pharmaceutical company, you've probably been in litigation with my office over, you know, sale of average wholesale price litigation was one of them. But, you know, I got to represent our consumers, and that's what I do. That's what attorneys general do. And so, you know, we in the Attorney General's Association work together. We work well with the federal government, and we hope that those entities that you represent will work well with us as well. The pharmaceutical industry has been behind us 100% on the, intellectual property theft issues, so we hope you'll continue to do that. I've got a few more minutes, and I want to leave time to answer some questions, but let me just start addressing a few issues that really concern me out there as an attorney general. And my job is to try to anticipate what the dangers are out there that local law enforcement can't necessarily battle. And one of the areas that in the future that we're going to see challenges from are 3D printing. I think 3D printing, how many of you know what 3D printing is? Most people here, you've heard of it. Well, right now, within 3 blocks here, somebody's got a $2,500 3D printer that can print a plastic part to fix a computer or fix this or that. They can actually print plastic guns now. And what it does, it just laminates, just like when you print something on a document, it keeps laminating back and forth. And it builds up. And these printers, they're $200,000 ones, that can print a lot of different things. In the future, you will be able to order online a tennis shoe, and it will print in a box in your house. Imagine what that's going to do. It's going to transform American business probably more so than the internet has. But also it'll bring challenges with it, because you can actually print food now online. It comes in like monofilament, looks like monofilament, yellow lines and pink and so forth, and you can print food. Google it, go online and you see that, that they're printing food. Well, guess what's next? Drugs. We will probably see in the next 10 years where prescription drugs, they will be able to print them in your home. There'll be cell phones. You'll order a cell phone, and now the technology is there to already melt the metal, not just a plastic, but a metal or a chemical. And so, this is like Dr. Spock. This is I don't know. It's mind-boggling. But the challenges for law enforcement and the protection of American companies that suffer from intellectual property theft will increase. Just think about when they steal your technology to make a tennis shoe, and then somebody on the street starts selling it out there. And that's about all. We export a lot still, but the main thing that America exports now is our intellectual property. America has stayed at the fore for its short 200-plus year history because of our intellect. Eli Whitney and the cotton gin, Ford, all of the innovation has been what we have thrived upon as a country. And if we don't, protect that intellectual property, we don't think our country could fall, but it could. It could go the way of Roman Empire. Think about it. USSR doesn't exist anymore. It disappeared in the 90s before our eyes. It's coming back, but anyway. One of the dangers, that we anticipate that we have. Another is hacking. Young people have devices. They've grown up with them. And so they know how to hack into each other's accounts, their Facebooks, and portray themselves as one another. But in that ability to hack, they're going to start hacking into a lot of other more dangerous areas. And American companies are now suffering from a lot of the loss of private information. We're going to see more of that in the future. We're going to probably see some innovative drug dealer hacking into a wholesale wholesale pharmacy delivery system. It could divert that kind of the thing out there. That is that from hackers is a challenge for all in law enforcement. But we also want to protect our drug supply and protect our citizens, because that's our job. And so I applaud your organization from getting groups together that some don't necessarily agree with you. That's the problem with Congress right down the street, because they don't talk to one another. They talk at each other. And so I applaud you listening to one another's ideas, and your efforts in prevention to try to talk about how we fix this problem. That's the best bang for the buck in law enforcement, is prevention, education. So I applaud your efforts, and I'm honored to be here with you. And if I have a few minutes, how many minutes do I have? Anybody? What time did I start? 5 minutes? Does anybody have any questions? All right. Well, there again, I've enjoyed being here with you. Thank you.